Welcome, folks, to this LinkedIn Live, and thanks for joining us on a Sunday evening. This LinkedIn Live will be all about your mobile brand strategy, and there's actually an Easter egg in this episode, a playbook to take away. I'm, of course, Shri, your co-host, and do check out my daughter's music at www.riaraj.com. That's www.rhearaj.com. And I'm joined by my co-host, Peter Bond, who is the Partnership Acceleration Lead at Flywheel Digital. Peter, how you doing on this Sunday evening?
Shri, it's great. Had a nice weekend and nothing like getting ready for the week than digging into this industry and particularly around mobile. I don't think we have given mobile first strategy its due consideration in our conversation. It's kind of in the background of everything we talk about, but kind of elevating it to the front of our conversation to say, how are brands really preparing themselves to win in what is increasingly a mobile first world? I think this is really important.
Couldn't agree more, Peter. And thank you, of course. And for our audience, if you look at our t-shirts, Peter, hold up your t-shirt. It says CPG Guys 300. What that means is we have hit episode 300. A reminder that do take a minute to listen to Kara Pratt from Kroger Precision Marketing at 8451 and the awesome conversation we had on Kroger's Retail Media Network as a special guest on episode 300 was Kara Pratt. Today's discussion will be all about mobile strategy and where it stands today. A lot, as Peter just mentioned, a lot has changed in the past 2 years. There's been cookie deprecation, screen time surging with consumers, all kinds of new DSPs, private label resurgence, audience changes, all converging on a huge change on driving consumer engagement through mobile strategies. To decompose that, we have none other than Jeff Williams, vertical strategy lead of CPG and Pharma from InMoby with us today. We are so happy to have you on the show. Why don't you take a quick minute and give our audience a brief overview of who InMoby is and your role at InMoby?
Yeah, it sounds good, Sri. Thanks for having me. Excited to be on with you guys today. InMoby is a global company. We operate in over 100 countries. We're an end-to-end mobile platform. And what that means, we kind of sit in an interesting spot in the digital mobile ecosystem. We started about 15 years ago as a mobile ad network, progressed into programmatic, and then eventually into the largest independent mobile SSP out there. Similarly timed, we also stood up our own performance DSP. So we're on the SSP and the DSP side of the business. And we also built a robust insights platform, and we've got some O&O properties that are live as well. We started in India, worked our way east to west. So properties such as Glance and Reposo that some of the international folks may know are making their way over towards the States, and more news to come on that later in the year. But I lead our vertical strategy team within InMoby for CPG and pharma. Within that, I am helping navigate clients and our team through the intricacies of the vertical, aligning data and insights and activations against our clients' objectives and what they're trying to do. And today I wanted to talk to you guys about the CPG playbook that we put together and released a little bit earlier in the year.
What's obvious, Jeff, is in the last 2 years, acronyms, we asked that I guess decomposes them. O&O for our audience, please.
Owned and operated. So owned and operated property. Our O&O apps.
Commodities, display was hard to secure as there isn't labor in store. Everyone's had to get a quick degree on how to work online in e-commerce. So I think it's fair for Peter and me, the CPG guys, and you to kind of say playbooks that existed in the past of the 4Ps and things of that nature. A lot of adjustments had to be made real time and dynamically. Inflation, then it's been a little bit of back to supply chain, could be command only attained by those who have differentiated that very playbook that we speak to. So the question I'd love to ask you is, in that scenario where most playbooks have been thrown out the window or heavily adjusted, why should a CPG build one from what kind of content, and why build one from a mobile media standpoint? And then if you built one, how would it hold up?
All tremendous points, Sri. It's been a rough couple of years. It's been a rough couple of months. So things continue to evolve quickly. They've been a lot more positive lately, which is a good news. Inflation seems to be slowing a little bit. Much of the supply chain seems to be stabilizing, fuel, commodities, things like that. Consumers continue to change and continue to shift. So, when we look at it, there's been a lot of impact into the CPG environment from all those things we just talked about. But inflation also tends to help the CPG community and vertical on a whole as consumers eat out less and they're spending a little bit more on groceries at home. But we really looked at it from the consumer side of things, and ad tech is not without its bumpy ride as well. I think we saw the meteoric rise during early stages of COVID through 21 was just the digital ad tech companies couldn't get big enough fast enough, and we're seeing the pain of that, I think, realize itself. Zuckerberg coined it the year of efficiency, right? So as this year has kind of worn on, I think we're seeing that things are stabilizing a little bit. So a lot of the ad tech pain was somewhat of their own making. Our own making was that things got too hot and heavy too quick. And as you look at e-commerce is still on a great trajectory over the last 5-7 years. It's just we had hockey stick growth for a year, and then we had a little bit of normalizing. So that's still going well, but we focused our playbook really looking at the consumer first. So looking at things like consumer brand value and loyalty, and also some of the more global topics that are continuing to ramp up in 23, but things like addressability, identity, open ecosystems for doing your digital media planning and targeting and things like that. So we tried to balance that purposefully. We didn't get too deep on one.
People wait till the end of this
one micro
LinkedIn
event
Live.
that's going on in the
We're
landscape.
actually going to
looked at broader topics, but took a consumer and bigger scaled approach.
Jeff, wait. Does that mean give them a playbook?
Of course.
Shri, in fact, if you scan the QR code that's now on the screen, you can get the playbook while you're listening to us talk. So, hey, Jeff, welcome. We're so glad to have you here on our LinkedIn channel today.
Glad to be with you, Peter.
You and I have known each other for a couple years, and what I like about what you just said is you start with the consumer. I think that is absolutely the best place to start any strategy if you want to win in this industry. The challenge, though, is loyalty has been a bit of a pain over the last 18 months. It's hard to build loyalty when you face, as a brand, supply chain constraints and out of stocks. It's hard to build loyalty when prices are going up. And of course, shoppers have so many choices on the internet. They're not limited by the space available on a physical shelf. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how all this is playing havoc in the ability to build a meaningful strategy for engaging consumers.
Absolutely. The easy answer is the stakes are high. InMoby ran a loyalty study earlier this year. We ran one in 22 and ran it again in 23. And I guess the most concerning part for our large brand partners who are listening in is the loyalty levels between national brands and store brands or private label are on very equal footing. So national brands have an average loyalty in our study of approximately 75%. Private label was at 70%. So when you look at not much of a delta there, as trade-offs happen, as consumers feel the economic pressure, things like that, as they potentially trade over to a store brand because of availability or price, they could be gone forever. And that's the vulnerability for large brands today is store brands have gotten so much better. It's not the knockoffs of 20 years ago. They're really quality branded players and competitors in the marketplace. And so as we look at even 22 and in totality, private label was up approximately 11%. CPG national brands were up about 6%, according to PLMA. So, it's that downturns in the economy can be good for the CPG vertical as consumers eat out less, but there are trade-offs happening within the ecosystem and consumers choosing to be a little bit more needs-based We even saw that with some of the Prime Day. There was a lot of essentials bought on Prime Day just recently. So things like that happen. Consumers are shifting, and brands need to be aware of it. Oh, one other quick add-on to that. A part of our study that we did look at was motivations. I didn't touch on motivations and kind of in the macro sense and what we're seeing in the sales trends, but we did measure and ask consumers about their motivations within the space, and that's shifting from 22 to 23 as well. Quality showed a positive increase of 3%. But price sensitivity and consumers decisioning based off of price was actually up 7%. So more than double. So when we look at consumer motivations, it just adds to that vulnerability. Consumers are looking for deals. They're looking for ways to stretch their budgets a little bit, and that creates another level of vulnerability for the brands.
Jeff, you're so right. There has been an uptick in private label consumption in the past few weeks. I would say for definitely the last 6 months, and maybe the trend was already brewing last year, so it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. You talked a little bit about motivators, but I'm curious, in your playbook, do you address brand switching of private label, and what's your observation there?
Yeah, we saw some interesting motivational switches on the consumer side with brand switching. So we analyzed a number of various categories, so food and bev, alcohol, baby, pet, a number of different categories. In every one of those categories, consumers had a greater than 50% consideration of switching to a private label on price. So when we dug a layer deeper into that, into some of the demographics, actually women were a little bit more frustrated about price increases than men at 64% versus 58% for men. And then when you think about price increases and the impact, younger generations have a little bit more flexibility versus the older generations who are on more of a fixed income. And we saw 72% of consumers who were 55 plus were highly frustrated by the price increases impacting the groceries. So it's out there, and when half of the consumers are willing to make a change, brands need to perk up and be ready.
All right, those are big numbers, Peter. I'm sure you'll agree with me. So now I'm going to start asking you the playbook and jump right there. And a reminder to, of course, everybody watching, look at the QR code right below us, and you can click on that to actually get the playbook. So given this is the current scenario where we stand in the CPG industry and retail, what can brands be doing, or what should brands be doing? I would likely say, what should brands be doing in the mobile space to offset some of these trends, which are obviously growing by the day?
Yeah, it's not a single silver bullet, but as e-commerce and we talked a little bit about some of that growth, and consumers were actually anxious to get back out there in brick and mortar. Still in CPG, it's still a lion's share. We're seeing great growth in e-commerce, but it's still a lion's share is happening in brick and mortar retail. But how consumers are engaging with loyalty programs and where they're looking for their loyalty or brand communications has absolutely shifted. And that is largely, eMarketer had a study to where 72% of respondents wanted brand engagements digitally, and 64% of those preferred that on their mobile device while they're shopping in store. So they're not looking for brand activations and things like that anywhere other than that small screen that they have on them at all times, which is good. But it just kind of goes to the fact that consumers have edited how they're engaging with brands, and it's largely on the small screen. So, we've made mention of it a couple times. Consumers will continue to eat more at home, but when you look at loyalty, just know that consumers are managing their budget. They're looking for those discounts. They're looking for promotions. They're looking for trade deals, and they're going to be managing their budgets. And brands need to communicate with consumers to stay on the offensive. Don't leave it to just the price at the shelf. If you do that, it's going to be the lowest price option, and you'll lose that loyalty and that connectivity that has established yourself with the consumer. So Again, back to the first stats we talked about, if the consumer trades down, they might be gone for good. So it's not just losing a purchase cycle, you could lose them for good. So mobile strategies, specifically on mobile, my purview. Mobile is, we have this often with clients and agency partners. Mobile is not just a social and retail media network play, right? A lot of times it's like check the box, but that's where the consumers are spending most of their time. And they have a lot of passions beyond scrolling through their social feeds or shopping, just looking at bottom of funnel. So when we look at finding those consumer passions and finding ways to engage with the consumers while they're in their passion moment, whether that be a health and wellness app or a fitness app or Words with Friends game, things like that, when they're in that moment and associating their passion, what better time to introduce your brand and be present in there and part of that moment.
With you about the mobile first approach. Over 90% of the people who listen to our traditional podcast do so on mobile devices. So it's critically important if you want to communicate with today's shoppers, because more often than not, they're not looking at that big giant screen on the wall. It's the little screen in their hand. So, Jeff, I want to pivot and talk a little bit more about loyalty. I think it goes to say that brand value works hand in hand with loyalty. Your playbook really dives into this topic as well. Why don't you help, for the people listening to this, watching us on LinkedIn, help define what you mean by brand value?
Yeah, it's kind of a broad term when just said out of context. So it can take brand value. We've talked so much about price. It can be a monetary thing. It can be, in today's universe, it can be social or causal types of values, or it can be emotive. And it's the latter that we touch on in the playbook. Is how do you establish a brand value that connects with consumers and how they feel about the brand, which is every brand's aspiration, right? Everybody wants to be that brand that has that deep heart tug connection with the consumer. But emotional connections, they differentiate and they help build loyalty. We've talked a lot about private label and how else can brands make you feel other than savings? You look at some of the folks who are doing it really well and have done it well for years. Coke and a smile, Coke and happiness, Cheerios and heart health. Right now, I will tell you one of the best doing it out there is Kraft Mac and Cheese and their ownership of comfort. Talked with that team a number of times, and they're just doing phenomenal work on associating the brand with that creature comfort, and especially in challenging times, that was kind of a perfect storm for them. But it's how do you associate those emotive connections with the consumers in a powerful way to build that loyalty, remove some of those vulnerabilities that we talked about, and push forward. And there's others that have done it in a unique way. I look at what Tide's doing with their cold wash. They're taking credit for the savings that you'd get by not heating your water to do your laundry. Like, brilliant, right? I mean, it's another way to bring a value to the table that even doesn't necessarily have to be purely emotive, but those types of approaches work really well. And Moby did a study on OTC just recently, just actually released a week ago. But we looked at the OTC segment. We were looking at awareness and trust, which is pretty important when you get into OTC and then into pharma. And top brands had an awareness score average. We analyzed 7 of the top companies and 5 or 7 of the top companies, and the top brands had an average awareness level of 46%, which is pretty strong. But when we looked at trust and which brands came in at number 1, trust, that average drops down to 20. So when you talk about creating that emotional connection with the consumer, they're going to trust you more, they're going to depend on you more, they're going to stay loyal to you more. All those become ancillary benefits of building that brand value in an emotive way with the consumers.
How interesting, Jeff. Listening to some of the scores of trust. That requires pretty dynamic and fast action. For those of you just joining us on the LinkedIn or midway through watching this video, we are actually speaking with Jeff Williams, the head of the pharma and CPG vertical at InMoby, and he is actually sharing plays from their latest playbook on your mobile brand strategy. So obviously, I'm going to dive into that even further, Jeff. So mobile, of course, continues to be a bustling media environment. How is it different than the media environment that brands are used to? And what trends are you seeing in mobile that CPGs should not only be engaging in, but should be dynamically adjusting their strategy for?
Yeah. There's no question. We hit on it a little bit. It's a screen of choice for consumers. The small screen and in-app dominates their share of time on the device. So they're on their device in apps, engaging with content and passions and things like that. When we look at advertising spend, the dollars have followed. 71% of digital spend is on mobile. So it's already there from an engagement standpoint. But I think what we're missing are a lot of the nuances. Pardon me. Mobile first strategies are continuing to grow, and we're seeing a lot of that. But we're seeing a lot of it being, okay, I'm mobile first, check all the boxes on social, or I'm mobile first, and my spend and programmatic, most of that goes mobile, so I don't need to think about mobile in a unique lens. And we think that's really a short-sighted approach. There are so many ways to engage in unique ways within mobile. When you get into video and rewarded videos to make you almost a part of the game, there's in-game. There's all these formats that give you 100% share of voice. So you really take over their screen. You're the only message they're seeing. As attention metrics continue to bubble up and become a bigger deal, I think those types of engagements, playable ad units, things like that, are going to become a lot more popular, and that's just a start. It's a vast playground for CPGs and for brands to play and engage with their consumers while they're in their passion moments.
Wow, Jeff, you're bringing a whole new lexicon to the CPG guys. We're very focused, obviously, on a lot of retail media terms and more traditional media, but this is great because we're trying to explore and learn more about where this industry is going, not so much where it is. So this is really helpful. Let me switch gears a little bit and talk about ad tech in particular. Our favorite topic on the CPG guys of late has been retail media in all its forms and functions. It is growing very rapidly, right? How are you advising consumer packaged goods manufacturers to view the current landscape vis-a-vis retail media networks? And particularly when you think about the big three advertising platforms, obviously Amazon ads, but there's Google and there's Meta. What are your thoughts around that, and how are you trying to direct your CPG clients?
Yeah, that's a bit of a tricky question. It's the third wave of really digital advertising is having a moment. It's going gangbusters for all the right reasons, right? I mean, first party data, connectivity with the shoppers, partnerships between CPGs and retailers getting stronger, better JBPs, things like that are happening as an offput of this. But multiple consumer touch points, and the attribution solution that, while it hasn't necessarily standardized across retail media networks, they are delivering attribution, which is another strong checkbox for retail media networks. So they've done a nice job, and you can totally understand why it's been a rocket ship. And it's really kind of turned grocers into media companies now, right? So it's changed that whole space. Our advice is not anything other than what anybody would tell you. Everything is good in moderation. So it shouldn't be all chips being pushed in on one lever. And the same thing can be said about mobile in-app advertising. I'm not telling you that push it all our way. We'd love that, but no, that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So the pendulum has swung pretty far, and now I think we'll find a little bit of rebalancing. Within that, retail media networks are doing great things. They continue to expand. They're doing great work for the brands, and they're working. And that's not a bad thing, but that's also going to create some dependencies for CPGs that they need to consider down the line if they're only really pushing heavily into one arena, whether it be retail media networks or the big three that you mentioned. Anytime you're playing in solely walled garden environments, you're cutting off some of your own capabilities for long-term potential and other things that you might want to do down the line, because of the loss of some of the control, if you will. So CPG brands really shouldn't solely rely on the outside first party data or become overly reliant on any of the walled gardens. They all perform. They're big for a reason. They work. And that's not a bad thing, but it shouldn't be the only thing. So moderation, and seek those open environments as testing grounds. So those are also environments to where you can do what you want. You can target how you want. Your creative can be what you want. So you get some flexibility in these open environments, which I think CPGs can lean in on that and use them for really powerful testing grounds, to think, plan, and act in a mobile-centric way, but in the brand's control.
Wow, Sri, did you hear that? Whether we're talking aspartame or media, it's all good in moderation.
Yeah, and I'm not convinced brands are really up and leaders in the open environment for mobile campaigns. And your advice is a good one, Jeff, that I think very senior leaders in brand, including CMOs, need to take a much deeper dive in that space and understand really the impact of things that have taken place, which is why you're really giving the advice to go deeper in that space. So obviously, Jeff, the next one that rises all the way up top in my mind is a lot has happened in the industries ever since Google announced. I think it's been a solid 2 years. It was this middle or start of the pandemic that there was going to be a change in the cookie philosophy and privacy. And what does that mean? First party data has been a topic that's gotten way too much press for the right reasons. CPG geared over the pandemic because of the lower funnel activation of e-commerce to retail media networks. Favorite word here on the CPG guys. We've had every large RMN on this network. Does that feel right to you? Is an RMN the solve? Is it something that can be done on the mobile side instead of relying solely on RMNs? And then what is InMoby's strategy in this space?
There's a lot to unpack there. It's a complex topic, and one that also I don't know if it's being thought of as broadly as it could or should be, at least from a mobile lens perspective. The deprecation of cookies, and ever since ATT happened, and then the deprecation of cookies, we talked about the 70% of digital is happening on mobile. Well, the solutions to cookie deprecation, a lot of the focus and attention has been on the cookie. Well, the solutions are being built for desktop and web environments. Really, the topic is bigger on addressability, and in the mobile environments, we're looking at mobile ad IDs, so MAIDs, because we need more acronyms. But the mobile ad IDs, and how do we create environments to get some cohesion in that, and kind of create options that balance precision for both national CPG, but also commerce teams, both precision but also scale. So it's a complex problem that I don't think anybody's going to solve with a silver bullet, and that's okay, because it's going to take time, and there's going to be a number of different opportunities or options that are going to come up in the environment. The targeting environments are just going to change. Identity and addressability are paramount. We're seeing a lot more talk about clean rooms and ID graphs. InMoby is a couple years in on building our ID graph, focusing on the mobile in-app consumer, how they're engaging, what they're doing, and filling in all the rows and columns around that ID graph. Then you're seeing much more collaboration in clean rooms amongst various ID solutions and first-party data sets. The reality is we're building for a multidimensional solution down the line. I don't think there's going to be one solution. So we're looking at consented, we're looking at ID or ID less, we're looking at cohorts, we're looking at contextual. So it's bringing all of this together to create flexibility and create those environments for CPGs and any of our partners to test, learn, and proceed. So that's where we're heading is building out more of a framework that's going to provide flexibility in multiple solutions, because there isn't going to be one solution to this problem, in my humble opinion.
So, Jeff, manufacturers tend to sell pallets to retailers through warehouses. They are not accustomed to selling eaches directly to consumers. That's just the nature of the industry. And as a result, they don't have a lot of longitudinal first party data. If they do, it's because they're experimenting with a little D2C. But generally speaking, they don't have that data asset. So as you're starting to get into this space and you think about identity solutions to be able to communicate directly with consumers, what advice do you give to CPG guys that are really just truly starting the journey into identity solutions?
Yeah, it's best advice for most any problematic situation. That's, get into action, take some action, partner with multiple. I made mention that we're building an ID graph. A lot of agencies are building ID graphs. A lot of partner teams are building ID graphs. It's going to be incumbent upon manufacturers to get out there and find out who's doing what's interesting, what aligns with their philosophy and where they want to go down the line, and get out there and experiment. Is again, you hit it on the head. They aren't selling directly to consumer at the scale and velocity, so they just aren't as first party data rich as other verticals or industries are, which has been some of the appeal for RMNs, and logically so. But we've got to be preparing now. The signals are going to go away. I think Apple iOS 17 is coming out, which will further limit some of that. Wherever Google ends up deciding to go here in Q1, but it's definitely happening. So you've got to be prepared. And like I said in my previous comments, there isn't going to be one solution. So you've got to be prepared to test multiple, experiment with multiple, run some analytics, find partners. InMoby's building our graph, but a lot of folks are building really smart graphs. And how can they be collaborative ID graphs? So there isn't going to be one that solves everybody's problem, but how can we merge these together utilizing clean rooms and things like that, to find the best outcomes? But working in flexible environments at least gives you more opportunity to control how the tests actually go.
That's awesome. We've packed so much in such a short order related to the playbook as well. And again, a reminder for those of you watching the QR code at the bottom right here, you can scan that to get the latest playbook from InMoby. A lot of what Jeff has referred to. Did we miss anything in terms of what's in the playbook that we haven't already covered here in the first few questions we've already asked you that can help CPG brands actually navigate all these changes over the last 24, 36 months?
Yeah, we hit some weighty topics, but yeah, there is a little bit more in the playbook itself. Thank you for that. The important ones, focusing on consumers, and the media dynamics. We touched on brand value, loyalty, addressability, and open environments. We also do quite a bit of looking into audience. So some of the audience nuances, who over where, but who go after who more than go after where they are, types of environments. But how does CPGs take control of their future with respect to their audience? Kind of ties into the addressability. It's kind of overarching. We also hit on programmatic media being largely driven by KPIs. I feel like this is one of those arenas to where RMNs have done a really nice job because their attribution, because their targeting. They tend to be a little bit more objective based campaigning, versus programmatic largely is about scale, reach, efficiency, and KPIs. So tell me what my CTR, VCR, viewability, we aren't seeing as strong an alignment. So I'd like to ask the CPG community to, challenge your programmatic teams a little bit more on what is the objective? What is the brand trying to do? What are the true objectives? How do we get there? And what are the right KPIs we should be looking at against that? So So we touch a little bit about that. And again, there's a lot of challenges, but challenges breed opportunities. So I think there's going to be a lot of growth in the next 18 months to 2 years that are going to come out of all of this around open environments, addressability, ID graphs, and solutions to the marketplace. And fortunate for me, I also truly believe it's going to be all centered around that small screen where consumers are spending 4.5 hours a day on.
Jeff, thank you so much. This has been a very illuminating conversation. I'll remind our audience you want to scan the QR code that's on the screen. Also, we're going to put in the comments of LinkedIn where this video resides a hyperlink to the actual site where you can go get the playbook. Jeff, if people want to reach out to connect with you directly, what's the best way for that to happen?
Sure, they can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. I'm active, so I'll be there. Otherwise, you can also catch me at Jeffrey Jeffrey.Williams@InMoby.com.
We'll make sure to put both your LinkedIn profile and your email address in the comments so people can reach out to you there. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Shree?
Jeff, I want to thank you on behalf of the CPG guys. A reminder to our audience, again, you can scan the QR code right here and get the playbook from InMoby. Of course, for those of you that either came in halfway or want to pass it on to others, this LinkedIn Live and video will live on forever on our LinkedIn page, so you can always refer to it with the link up top to anybody you need to. And mobile is one of those areas we're going to get deeper and deeper into. And I'm anticipating, Peter, we're going to have InMoby back here for a couple more LinkedIns. This is a hot topic, and the CPG guys need to get into it a whole lot more. So if you're up for it, Jeff, we do want to continue this dialogue with InMoby and then get deeper on this playbook. Does that feel good, Jeff?
Without question. Thank you guys so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
A final reminder to our audience that the CPG guys is also a partner level sponsor of the Next Up, formerly known as the Network of Executive Women. And as part of that, we are giving away 50 memberships to the organization. So for female founders and women who don't have sponsorships through their companies, reach out to us by dropping us an email at contact@cpgguys.com, or again, the reminder, contact@cpgguys.com, and we'll make sure to get you a membership. That's a wrap of this LinkedIn Live. Jeff, thank you for joining us. We look forward to having InMoby again. See you soon to our audience.